One night, about 3.5 years ago, I was driving to my mom's from my dad's, and my girlfriend was following me in her car. Well, I looked down for 1 second, and when I looked back up, there's a massive coyote in front of my car. It was all mangy, with bad teeth, and it was super tall. Well, I proceeded to hit it, going like 50 miles per hour. I even felt my car kind of bump as I hit it. Anyway, my girl saw me slam on my brakes, so she called me and asked what happened. Once I told, she sounded very freaked out because she didn't see anything, nor did anything come out from under my car. We were pretty freaked out, so we just finished the drive to my mom's. Once there, we looked at my car and it was effed up. Like it looked like I hit another car or something. So I told my mom, and we went back to the scene. There was no coyote body or pieces of my car. It really effed me up for a long time. Well, flash forward to a couple months ago, me and my now fiance learned of skinwalkers. And as we were discussing it, that's what I think I might have hit all those years ago. We heard an ear-piercing woman scream right by our front door. I mean, it sounded like she had her mouth against the door. But when we went to check, there was absolutely no one. We vowed that day to never talk about it again. One night, I was driving home around 2 a.m., and this tiny, tiny white creature, probably as tall as a Pringles can, maybe a bit smaller, walked across the road in front of my car. I couldn't believe what I saw. So I called my then boyfriend and frantically described the creature. He told me it sounded like the Fresno Nightcrawler. When I got home, I looked it up. That's exactly what it looked like. I've never heard about them before. I do not live in California, not even close. I still have no idea what it was. Some more details about what I saw, because I hadn't thought about it in a while, but now it's all coming back to me. The bottom of its legs ended in what looked like flowy bits or ribbons. It was almost translucent. I could almost see the road through the creature. It walked at kind of a jaunty pace, just like a person might walk. The best way to describe it is super steppy walk that dwarves sometimes do in Snow White, or Mickey Mouse does sometimes. I slowed my car down, but was afraid to stop it completely, and the thing disappeared as my car went through it. Honestly, it was so effing cute that I wasn't even scared, but I was shaken up by having seen something like this. I've been deep sea fishing a few times. You never see schools of fish so far out, but once we saw this massive shadow moving fast. It couldn't have been a whale. They don't move like that. The skipper stared at this massive blue with me for about 20 seconds before it was gone and swore it was Megalodon. I'm not convinced, but I have never seen a school of fish that far out in the ocean, ever. When I was 14 or so in 2003, I saw what looked like an orangutan lemur hybrid watching me from the trees. When it realized I was looking at it, it took off into the trees and disappeared. This was in western North Carolina. Nothing like that should have been around here. For a few years, I looked for articles about someone's escaped exotic pet, but I never found anything. Eventually, I just wrote it off. Years later, I heard a lore episode about the pukwudgie, and I immediately got chills because the description matched what I saw. I'm not sure what happened. A few months ago, I was dumb enough to wander in the same patch of woods. I got nailed by a rock, and when I looked up, I saw a small outline ducking around like it was watching my reaction. Again, when I recognized what I was looking at, it took off. I don't plan on going back. A friend was at our place for a sleepover as kids, bedtime, both lying on a mattress in my room. Suddenly, this transparent, greenish, hued man slowly came in from the window and kind of just hovered in the air above us for a good 10, 20 seconds. Then slowly evaporated. I'd call it a dream, but after a moment of silence, my friend asked if I had seen it too. We put the lights on after that. On that note, we had an incident with a Ouija board later in life as a teen that kind of spooked me out too. We had 2 people using the board and a third asking questions to prove it worked. It actually gave answers we shouldn't have known. Something like me asking the other 2 distant relatives' dogs' names, and them getting it right despite 100% never coming up with it before. It ended up being incredibly strange by the end, and we burned it out of fear. My friend was at a camp with me, and we were in the same cabin. We stayed up until we got tired and went to sleep. My friend, let's call him Chandler, and I stole some instant coffee packets from the kitchen, and we had them in water at night. Chandler didn't have a good caffeine tolerance like me, so he stayed up a bit after all of us went to sleep. I asked him what he was going to do, and he said he brought a novel. He was going to read it until he fell asleep. So it's about 1 a.m. We were all peacefully sleeping, and then we hear the biggest scream. Chandler was crying and shaking in his sleeping bag, and everyone in our cabin came over to see what was wrong to help him out. He was screaming really loud, and if that didn't wake up other cabins and the teachers, his loud crying after did. Soon, all the teachers were inside the cabin, and I had to stay on my bunk bed, not to be squashed. Chandler told us he saw a ghost wandering around our cabin. He said he also heard the wind breeze while the ghost was moving. Another guy in my cabin backed him up, saying he also heard that. Chandler was sent home, and everyone continued camp. However, it felt very weird. I talked to him a lot. When we all got home, he told me more details. Found it really weird because Chandler is the most honest guy I know, and he didn't seem too easy about it. He was traumatized. I was considering it was the effect of the coffee, but the night before as well. Didn't see and no hallucinations. Plus he was a regular drinker and he loved the taste, even though it made him stay up all night. The story still shakes me to this day. About 16 years ago, I lived in the rural areas of Kansas, about 6 miles from my house. And one night, while I was waiting for sleep, I stared out my window and looked out into the darkness. Normally, I'd see owls, possums, raccoons, coyote, all just minding their business. I could always hear them, loud and clear. One night, as I'm trying to get to bed, I watched and listened for the wildlife. On this site, there was none to be heard or seen. Being a kid, I didn't know this and thought nothing of it. At the time, I would eventually see a huge black figure moving on all fours. I could swear I'd seen a brown bear. This thing was massive. We lived in Midwest Kansas. We have no bears. I never saw it again. I used to go running and take a break at a train bridge in Iowa City when I went to school there. I did a lot of night runs. Sometimes, only after dark, I'd hear something swimming around at that train bridge, maybe human or deer-sized. One time, it was late, and I heard it again. But this time, I could see something dark on the water. It looked like a profile of a very large head. I said, "Hello? Someone there?" It stopped dead still and looked at me. It was dark, but I could tell it was looking right at me. This went on for about 30 seconds or a minute. then went under and never saw or heard it again. I told myself it was a person swimming. Why not say hi back? Also, where did it go under to? It was a slow river. I would have heard it surfacing or getting out of the water unless it went over 100 feet. It's the closest thing to a cryptid I've seen, and I still know nothing about. Some people are saying beavers and otters. I've seen ritter otters. It was far too big to be a normal sized one. I've never seen 6-foot ones. I don't think they're anywhere near Iowa. It was much too big to be a beaver. I see those all the time. They're usually denoted by telltale signs such as dams and chewed trees. I've never seen beavers active at night, only during the day. I think it was probably just a person, maybe a homeless person who wanted to not be bothered. It all started as a warm May night, May 28th to be exact. Nothing was out of the ordinary. My friends and I were playing video games on a school night, procrastinating homework, and yelling at each other about some stupid problem in the game. We grew tired of playing video games, so I signed off for the night. I don't live far from a general store, so I thought I might as well hop on my bike, ride there to grab some cream soda and sunflower seeds. So I did. The bike ride usually takes about 10 minutes to get there. The bike ride consists of going through my neighborhood, a scary-ass bike trail, then another neighborhood. So I put my earbuds in and rode there. Got all the way there just to realize I didn't have my wallet. Very disappointing since it was getting dark. I got back on my bike and started the ride back. Usually when I go back, I cut through a backyard instead of taking the trail. It's mainly downhill on the way back, so I usually don't have to take the trail. But for some reason I felt compelled to go down the trail, like a pull. When I was riding down the trail, I heard an inhuman screech. I mean like a mix between a bald eagle and a human scream. I, of course, looked towards the sound came from and saw an extremely skinny, super pale, very tall figure get on all fours and start running at me. When I say extremely skinny, I mean like skin and bones, and the legs and arms were super long, and the face was nearly featureless, besides for a mouth and 2 black eyes. I got the hell out of there as fast as I ride my bike can handle. I know I wasn't just imagining it. I now have my license and refuse to go down that trail when it's remotely close to dark out. I saw a shadow figure. I've never felt cold fear like I did in that moment. I was startled so badly. It was when I was 9, and just still haven't thought about believing since. It instilled me like a caution. I do my best to avoid interacting with anything supernatural to this day. I believe in it, but I don't want to get close at all. I work at an old-ass building, renovated into something new. Had a few previous staff mention that they've seen a woman in white at the top of the stairs or walking through the kitchen. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Until the day everyone was in bed, one staff upstairs, one at the table with me. I turned around and very briefly saw a face in the dark conservatory. My heart could have leapt out of my chest. I made someone check with me, just in case it was an intruder. Nothing. Doors locked, no one's there. 100% first thought, it's not a ghost. It was an intruder, a robber. We have meds and vulnerable people. So when I say we checked, we checked. I was also walking out of the kitchen another time, and I felt someone tap my shoulder. When I turned, there was literally no one behind me, or even in the room. Nothing else has happened since, though some PM night staff did report some few strange sightings, but not for a while. I'm not like early day Ryan Bergera carrying holy water in a water pistol and screaming at a torch believer, but it has made me believe it's possible, because I cannot explain these events. When I was 13, my mom, sisters, and I went to go visit our great-grandma and grandma. It was right after Christmas, and we were going to stay for the weekend and then head back home. Well, the day came for us to leave, and Mom said we had to stay one more night. Well, me being a bratty 13-year-old that just wants to go home to some Wi-Fi, I threw a big fit and ran up to my room. My sisters and I were sharing. I get to the room and no one was there, so I closed the door, threw myself under the covers, popped my headphones in, and blasted my music. I don't remember how much time passed, but it wasn't long. I'm guessing maybe 15-20 minutes. I all of a sudden feel someone jump on the bed right next to me. Now I'm still pissed. I thought one of my sisters came to the room to bother me, so I ripped the covers off and yell at them, and no one is there. I scramble off the bed, took a quick look around to make sure it wasn't my sisters, and effing bolted. I didn't even tell them until we got back home because I was too afraid to speak about it. On one of our first Disney trips at our Kissimmee apartment, I saw red eyes in the closet. Pretty messed up because that's where I was sleeping that night. My sister and I were getting ready to go out one day. I was doing my makeup in front of a large mirror, and in my periphery, I saw her come into the room and stand in the background, watching me get ready. After about 30 seconds, I asked her, "Are you ready?" But she didn't reply. I was still looking at myself, but I could see she hadn't moved. I repeated the question and still no response. Finally, I asked, "What are you doing? Why won't you answer me?" And turned to face her. And as I looked toward her in the mirror, I saw an unfamiliar woman standing there who looked nothing like my sister. By the time I finished turning around, she was gone, and the room was empty. There was no way I imagined it. I had seen her walk in. She stayed there for about 2 minutes, and I saw her very clearly as I turned. The fact that I actually talked to her says it all. A few months later, my great-grandma and great-aunt who lived there both separately described the same woman watching them in other parts of the house. I only told my mom, not them, so she was shocked as I when they talked about it. None of us have ever believed in paranormal, and none of us ever told ghost stories. I always wanted to believe, but never had an experience of my own to allow me to. Until one day, I was home alone, and as plain as day, I heard someone stomp up my basement steps to the floor I was on. I was sitting maybe 12 feet away from the steps, and I was frozen as soon as I heard them. I was watching closely, and the sound got all the way to the top of the steps, but no one was there. My cat was sleeping on the couch adjacent to me. He woke up suddenly and stared right at the stairs too. He heard it too. So that's how I know I wasn't crazy. Crap was wild to experience. When I was around 9, 10, I was camping with friends' family, and one night, while I was sleeping, someone I didn't know unzipped the tent and looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Do you have a hammock tarp?" Besides the fact that I have no idea what the hell that is, the dude was absolutely ginormous, like Shaquille O'Neal, but fatter. Later, while me and my friend were peeing, yes, we peed together, I was 10, shut up, he brought up that his dead uncle died in a car crash with his friend's aunt, used to fish around here, and upon seeing a photo of him, it was the exact dude who came up to my tent. Creepy as hell. I recorded a voice saying a full sentence in an empty room in an empty motel. I recorded it on my phone. This was 11 years ago. I never got rid of the phone. It's in a baggie in my photo box. I still turn it on every few years to listen to it. I like looking at the night sky. I often check what's up and see if it's going to be cloudy or fine. UK, it's better 50-50. It'll be cloudy. Anyway, I lived near Southampton and light pollution was an issue. So I'd drive out into the country to a tiny village where there's no light pollution. I found a lay-by. Opposite a church, and there was a bench in a graveyard. Perfect. I did this for years, maybe 5 or 8 times a year. Never a concern. At one time, the air went cold around me. Then it felt like a very cold thing sat where I was. Not next to me, where I was. I could feel it going inside of me. I left very quick. I'd never been back. Even now, over 10 years later, just writing this, made all my hairs stand on end. A couple years ago, me and a few of my friends went camping by a river. About 100 yards behind us, this old abandoned house, and 150 yards next to it used to be a house, but it burned down and killed the homeowner years ago. All of us were sitting by the campfire, and my Jeep is 15 feet to the left of me, and I randomly see something move behind it. So I look over, and this 7-foot tall, pure white cloud floats from the ground and disappears into the tree we're under. Me thinking my eyes are playing tricks on me, I look back at my friends, and one friend directly on the other side of the fire is looking at the place where I saw the cloud and says, "Well, that's effed up." I said, "You saw that too?" And he explained exactly what I just saw. Gave me chills. 10 minutes go by and we hear a bunch of loud banging come from the old house. Then it goes silent. And a few friends say see lights come from the woods. So all of us leave everything and drive back home. As I was passing the house, I look over and see a pure white ball sitting next to the house. I've never seen or experienced anything like that and would like to know what it was. This was recent, somewhere around 2021. I had a big sleep. I wake up around 10 to 11 a.m. and see what appears to be an elderly person looking at me, wrapped up in a lot of scarves, just looking at me from the side of my bed. I get up to try to see if I was tripping, but it just vanished. Weeks later, my mom tells me about the past owner was an elderly lady. And I remember back to what happened one morning, and it gives me chills to think about. Another time, I was around age of 9, I woke up having to pee. So I call my mom to turn on the light for me as I walk in the pitch black. I get up to turn my head and walk down to the bathroom. I see a shadow figure, the height of me, same skinny body and head shape, standing like it was me. Just a figure that was black, like 2D, had no face. It runs into the kitchen, down into my lounge room. I turn to my mom and say, "Did you see that? Did you hear that?" And she replies with, "No, what was it?" I just say, "Oh, nothing." I take a pee. I try to go back to sleep, but I can't. I'm just trying to figure out what the F that was. I still can't figure out what it was. My mom's parents rented an old church house, and they used to come down to the kitchen every morning and find the cellar door open. Eventually, Granddad got fed up with it and bolted it shut. Next morning, the bolt was undone and the door was open. Previous tenants were elated, so they asked them if it ever happened to them. They said it did. Even tying the door shut with a rope didn't stop it. Fast forward a few months, and my grandparents are out at the pub on New Year's Eve, so my mom and her siblings decide to watch the door. Around 11 p.m., they hear heavy footsteps coming up the steps and dragging chain sound. The dog was the first one to run away, and as the footsteps got closer, eventually they all ran and hid upstairs. Eventually, my grandparents came home, and the kids finally came downstairs. The door was open. The dog refused to come down until the next day. Years later, I decided to look up the house. It was still there. No one lived there anymore, so I quickly peeked into the kitchen window. There was a massive pile of furniture in front of the cellar door. I could just see the top of the door over the pile, and it was slightly open. I was coming home from work one night. To get to my house, I usually take a route that takes me past an old Civil War graveyard. I was on the phone with my mom at the time because I hate driving alone at night. And I guess being on the phone made me feel a bit safer. Well, all of a sudden, right when I got to the graveyard, my mom's voice cut out mid sentence and these weird guttural noises started coming through my phone. I don't know how to describe it other than it sounded like a lot of people talking all at once in a language I've never heard before. At first, I thought maybe something was wrong with my phone, so I just decided to restart it. They should have fixed it, right? Sound couldn't possibly come out of it with it off, right? Wrong. When I tell you I almost threw my phone out the window because these noises and voices were still coming out of it. My phone was completely powered off, and the noises and voices were still there. I literally had to take the battery out of my phone for it to finally stop. To this day, I don't know what the hell that was that night, and I don't think I even want to know. Needless to say, I take a different route home after that. My mom, told me about a story. I don't remember as I was too young. She was bathing me in a trailer she had back then. And I asked her, Mommy, who's that man behind you? No one was there. She also told me there was a rocking chair that rocked by itself. Another time, I was staying the night at my cousin's grandparents' place. Woke up in the middle of the night to what sounded like multiple people talking in the next room. I didn't think it was all too weird until I asked my cousin about it years later, and he said he woke up too that night and didn't recognize the voices. I heard a man talking one night about his regrets and stuff like that when my mom and dad were both asleep next to me. It was sort of a wake up, hear weird talking, think nothing of it, go back to sleep type thing. I was very young. I was at a new apartment, first night there. Those apartments are right next to a cemetery. I had the same nightmare the whole time I lived there. I still remember it very clearly. My buddy and I were up to no good one summer. For some reason, I really wanted to rob a house. I was a bad kid. Anyway, after we broke a window or some other hood rat crap, we went running back to his house. On the way there's a big mansion house on about 2 to 3 acres of land in a weird spot, really. It was behind a convenience store in a residential neighborhood on the bad parts of town. Anyway, we were running to this house. We were passing the mansion in a field. We saw what looked like a woman in a long white dress keep pace with us. Not at a running pose. We couldn't see her feet. She was just floating at a speed we were running. We got back to the house. I asked if he saw it. He said yes. That was that. Never saw it again. About 6 years ago, when I was a kid, I was playing with my toys in my room alone. The rest of my family was in the living room across the house. I was facing a closet, which was about 4 feet in front of me. I saw someone standing over in the top of my vision, wearing flannel, jeans, and boots. I look up from my toys, figuring it was my dad, and the person disappears. I didn't think much of it. I figured the clothes were set up in a way that appeared vaguely humanoid, although I was a bit skeptical because the clothes didn't match anything in my closet. That happened a few more times. I'd walk into my room and see someone sitting at the table but disappear once I looked directly at the area. Eventually, after this happening several more times a day for about a week, I confronted my mom and explained everything, looking for some comfort or reassurance. She stayed silent for a second and told me she was also seeing these mysterious figures, especially for the past week as well. My heart rate fired up and I realized it wasn't just me, and the idea I wasn't just seeing things solidified. I was genuinely terrified for a while. After talking with my mom, I never saw anything similar again. About a decade ago, when I was still in high school, I always used to ride my bike to school in the early hours of the morning. My road would lead me through these beautiful forested areas, past meadows for livestock, and through tranquil country roads. I loved biking there before the sun came up in the winter. The road is split in places. There's one lane for bikes, a small ditch, a larger lane for forest rangers to drive their cars along. One time I was riding along the bike lane when suddenly on the car lane I saw a light, about head level, very bright, but not blinding. It was slightly behind me and moving at a steady pace along with me. I wasn't scared, more like unsettled due to suddenly it had appeared and how it was slowly moving my way. I stepped it up and got out of there. Didn't look back. Rode that road for years. Never saw it again. Not long, I hiked there in the middle of the night, hoping to see it again. I figured maybe returning to the area after so long would trigger it to happen again. Maybe it would recognize me or my intent to see it, but no luck. Doesn't have to be supernatural. Could have been ball lighting. But even if it was, I feel privileged to have witnessed it. Ball lightning or wisp, it was a unique experience. One I really wish to experience again. I ran an old pub in Tasmania and had two experiences. First was late at night when I was closing up, doors locked, most of the lights off and counting the day's takings. Heard someone whistling as they walked out of the men's toilets and walked across the bar. I called out to apologize for locking them in there, and he just turned into vapor. He was wearing clothes that would have been common clothes like 80 years ago. The second was also at night, but in my room while I was trying to fall asleep. Had a feeling of not being alone, and all of a sudden I could hear what sounded like a massive aggressive dog growling in my ear. I could feel the heat from its breath on the side of my face. I couldn't bring myself to move or look for what felt like 20 minutes. When I was finally able to, I got up and checked the door and the window in my room, and I was locked in by myself. The man in the bar disappearing made my heart skip a beat, but the growling still makes me feel slightly scared. It was the only time I ever felt like I can only describe as pure evil was in my presence. Very memorable experience. Looking at a magazine in bed, the bottom bunk using a flashlight, all of a sudden there was someone standing next to my bed, so close the top bunk beamed, blocked the view of light of them from about nipple height up. Got super scared and turned away. When I looked back a second later, of course there was no one there. He was wearing jean overalls with red and black checkered flannel underneath. Coming to find out, an old guy died not only in my house, but in that room way before we lived there. He died of natural causes. I think I've had other weird small experiences like orbs and faces in the dark here and there. My friend, during a party, went to get a ping pong ball that bounced down the hall. When he backed to get it, he saw an old man wearing overalls and a black and red checkered flannel staring in my bedroom. I hadn't told anyone about it this time, and when he came back super freaked out, I described what he saw. He was tripping. After he described it, it was probably 10 years from the bunk bed situation in the party. As a toddler, I had an imaginary friend called Nathaniel, who I told my mom all about. According to my younger self, he caught rats and wore wire-rimmed glasses. My mom was fascinated by these unusual details and did some research. Apparently, rat catcher was a common occupation for young boys in Victorian England, where our house was built. Also, Nathaniel was a popular boy's name. Still to this day, nobody has a clue where I would have gotten those details at such a young age. I was recently at a paranormal circus event at Warrior on the River in Tallahassee. There was a girl named Beth that was killed there. She contacted us through a spirit box. But the other devices picked up a lot scarier sounds. They found Sasquatch beds along the river outside as well. So I believe ley lines, Native American villages, and the abundance of energy is a true catalyst to it all. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here.
Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!
Flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.
Creatures over there! You have to beware! Please! Watch out! The big creature! The big creature! No! 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 The fish monster! Watch out! Please come back!